This is the SEO Mindset podcast with your hosts, Sarah McDowell and Tazmin Sullivan. This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode. Hello there, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the SEO Mindset podcast with your hosts, me, Sarah McDowell, and the fabulous Tazmin Sullivan. This week, we have a special episode for you. So, each season, we've decided to invite our dear friend, Jack Chambers-Ward, host of the Search with Candour podcast, who we collaborate with to bring you a live podcast twice a year during Brighton SEO, to join us for an episode. Who is Jack? An SEO specialist with 5 years of experience and also a podcast host and producer with more than 10 years of experience. Alongside Search with Candour, he also hosts, edits and produces the popular movie podcast Sequelizers, which is all about fixing bad film sequels. He's also a published writer with previous work including the 300 plus page graphic novel D-Day, Storming Fortress Europe, and British Showcase Volume 1. For this season and the first special episode, we've decided to do a recap on the live podcast that happened in April 2024, where the topic was all about being authentically yourself. Me and Tazmin were joined by a special guest, Willow Mack, Senior Vice President at Stat Search Analytics, and the conversation was amazing. It was so open, raw, transparent, and it was such important and good conversation to be had. Unfortunately, Jack couldn't attend the live podcast in April because he was attending a wedding. I know, talk about priorities. We're joking. We're joking with you, Jack. So, in this episode, we get his views on the live podcast, but also ask him what it means to be authentically himself and how he has overcome certain challenges or obstacles that have got in his way. Now, before we crack on with this episode, reminder of how you can support us. So if you head on over to our show notes, there is a link to our Buy Me a Coffee page where you can give us a one-off donation. Or again, in those show notes, follow the link to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred playing app. And while you're there, why not give us a 5-star review? Because, you know, algorithms and all of that stuff, the more reviews we get, the more followers, the better chances we have of growing and more people being aware of this podcast. Right. Shall we crack on then? I really hope you enjoy this episode because, yeah, it was a great episode to record with Jack and our dear friend, with Tazmin and our dear friend Jack. Hello, Tazmin and Jack.
Hey, Sarah. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's good. It's nice to be back on the show. Very exciting to join you guys back once again since, as we're about to discuss, I missed doing a live podcast with you in Brighton. So it's nice to be back on the SEO Mindset podcast with you.
There you go. And Tazmin, how are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. And we missed you, Jack. It was not the same.
Oh, whoa. You got boos in the crowd for me. Thank you very much.
I didn't boo. Somebody else. I can't control other people.
I saw the little sneaky thumbs down there, Tazmin. I saw it.
Absolutely
I watched the YouTube.
Not. Zero chance of that. This is what this is. I'm enjoying this already.
Just remember, Tasmin, nothing gets by Jack. Jack is attention to detail.
I'm
So
always
he
watching.
saw those thumbs. Always watching. Anyway, so as we've all hinted, this episode is a special episode. So in the intro that you heard before, we introduced that Jack is going to become a regular guest.
Hooray!
On the SEO Mindset. So each season, each time, you're gonna be popping back, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a nice thing to have the dynamic in the relationship we've built over the last couple of years or so, nearly now. I think, and you were a guest on Search with Candor. I think it was 18 months ago, 2 years ago now, Sarah, when we talked all the way back about imposter syndrome. And obviously, we've gone on to do the live podcast together. Tasmin, you've been on Search with Candor. I've been on SEO Mindset once before as well, and now we're kind of continuing to build that relationship and make sure that we're going to be doing bigger and better live events in the future, which, you know, we're working on, we're planning at the moment, don't worry. And a more collaborative kind of thing on the podcast side of things as well, which is very exciting.
Very, very exciting. Very, very exciting. So the topic that we are going to discuss is the live podcast that happened during Brighton SEO in April. So it's been a couple of weeks now. And unfortunately, Jack, you weren't there, but we had a cracking guest join us, didn't we, Tasmin?
No, she was great. Willow was great.
So we had Willow Mack from Stat Search Analytics, and it was great to get their input and their insights on the topic. And what was the topic, Tasmin?
It was about being authentically yourself and unapologetically authentic.
All of that good stuff. Now, before we get into this episode, I just want to remind you, and we'll put a link in the show notes, that because that was recorded live, you can listen to it. So you'll be able to listen to that live recording on the SEO Mindset podcast. So we'll pop a link in the show notes. And Jack, it's going on the Search with Candor. Is that correct?
It is indeed, yeah. And you can also go and check it out on Silicon Brighton's YouTube channel as well, if you want to go and watch the video version featuring your lovely selves and the audience who contributed questions and stuff like that. That was very, very cool. I know we've had that in the past. And from what I saw, from my kind of like viewer side of things and my perspective, and I say this as like, you know, a little bit of a contributor, so I'm not taking too much credit, but it felt bigger and better than ever. And I kind of want to get you guys, what was your feeling in the room about how it went this time? How did it feel having a guest like Willow on? Shout out to Willow, huge credit to Willow. She was brilliant on the show, bringing some really interesting insights and stuff. So yeah, what was it like for you guys? Now it's the third time we're doing it. It was a bigger audience than we've ever had before. How was it recording a couple of weeks ago at time of recording, a few weeks ago at time of recording?
It definitely felt, and sorry, Tasmin, I've jumped straight in. So yeah, hope you don't mind. I was brown nosing Jack there, like, yeah, let me answer first. So it definitely felt more established, and I don't know, there was a certain excitement and vibe around it, especially leading up to it, because obviously we were shouting about the event for a while beforehand, getting people aware, getting other people to share the live podcast. But what was really interesting is as we got closer and closer to the event, technically we sold out twice, which was incredible. So we reached our first goal of 100 tickets, talked to the venue, which was the Projects, the Lanes, beautiful venue, and said, can we increase it? They gave us the go ahead, and we increased it to 120, smash that. So I think it doesn't just go to show like the excitement and the buzz and the popularness of it, but it also goes to show that an event like this is needed. Yeah. So an event where you can come and hear a discussion about a topic that is important to your SEO, personal growth, mindset, mental health. You can listen to that conversation, but you can also be involved as well. And talking to people afterwards, that was the sort of feedback that we were getting, that they were so glad that we'd created a space and an opportunity for this to happen, for people to come and be vulnerable and learn and chat with each other. And also it helped a lot of people set themselves up for Brighton SEO the next day. Tazmin, what would you add?
I'd say it went from being something that we did to something that was part of us. When we started to talk about it, we knew that this was something we wanted to do. We knew why we wanted to do it. And the first time, we were really fortunate with the number of people that supported us, but it still did feel like an uphill struggle to spread the word, to get buy-in from certain organizations as well. And now I don't mean to, sound like all boasty or anything, but it felt like we had grown in confidence because suddenly that vision that we had of what we wanted to create was taking fruition and getting recognition for it. So it felt really good. And when I say it's part of who we now are, the other day we got this invite for a wedding in October, and my husband straight away looked at me and said, "That doesn't clash with Brighton, does it? It's not having a dig because we'd have to go abroad." And I said, no, Brighton will be done by then. We're okay. But it feels like it's become part of our identity and part of what we contribute to the industry, and it feels really nice.
Yeah, definitely. That was the impression I got just from, reading the feedback, seeing what's been posted on social stuff, like even the people who weren't directly feeding back to us. I know we had a great video from Ash talking about his experience in the audience, and I loved a couple of the quotes from Ash's feedback of, I didn't have to say anything, but I felt heard. It feels like such a powerful statement of just feeling like you're welcomed in that atmosphere and you're like feeling like you're a part of something. Like you said, Tazmin, there, like it feels like it's something that sets people off on the right mindset to go forward for the rest of the conference, right? It's a perfect pre-conference event. And I know planning the previous two with you guys, like that was totally our intention, right? This seems to be the culmination of our planning and our kind of intentions going forward, right? That was the idea, was we want to do this the night before so people can get in the right zone, have some good advice and some tips so they can have a better experience at the biggest search marketing conference in the UK, which can be very intimidating and stuff. And I think, since we talked about confidence and anxieties and stuff previously, I love the idea of the topic this time around of being unapologetically and being authentically you, because as Ash said, as a few other people in the feedback have said, I've seen a few posts on social media as well saying like these are topics that aren't often discussed in the conference setting, right? That is the thing where it kind of gets lost in the kind of corporate marketing jargony stuff that is so common in these settings. And to have, the three of you guys, and including Willow, sat up on stage just being totally honest about here's what I've struggled with as a person, as a woman, as a mother, as a marketer, as a podcaster, like all these different parts of you guys talking about, how your life kind of comes together.
And it got really vulnerable, didn't it, Tazmin? And I definitely feel, because something that is a bit alien is in such a public and open space being that open and that vulnerable and that transparent. But I think that just goes to show the kind of community and the people that come along to these kind of events, because it's all about supporting one another. And so my vulnerability came from, during the discussion, we sort of gave our opinion and our thoughts on what it meant to be authentically ourselves. And what it would be good, Jack, is to understand how you would answer that question. But before you do, some of the vulnerability that came was we shared some success stories, and I didn't even think that I'd end up talking about this. So beforehand, we'd like plan the episode, we'd plan the sort of structure and the questions, didn't we, Tazmin, and kind of planned like what we wanted to cover. And during the night, I ended up telling everyone about my coming out story.
Yeah.
I had no, like, that wasn't the plan beforehand. But as we were talking, and Willow and Tasman were being so open about what authentically being them, then I was like, well, 100%, this is a massive part of my journey, because it was a journey. And after I opened up and I spoke about it, obviously I had a bit of a moment where, crikey, Sarah, you're going down this route. But there was people from the LGBTQ plus community afterwards that all came up to me and was just like, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that. You helped us be heard, or you sharing that story resonated with me. And they were just so grateful that that kind of story or that vulnerability came up. And Tasmin, what was your vulnerability that was discussed?
It was about when I was growing up in this country, and we're talking about the 70s now, so racism was rife, and you almost had to hide your identity. Not almost, you did. You hid anything about your faith or your culture. But I've been here since I was 4. So then when you went home, you weren't quite. I think I used the quote from the Green Book that, when he says, I'm not black enough to be black, I'm not white enough to be white, and I'm not man enough to be man. It felt like that growing up. So it's been me learning how to find out who I am authentically and owning it and then portraying it. And it was strange because the next evening I was sat at the Seekers dinner, which was, again, a wonderful evening. And I sat opposite this woman. We got into the conversation about faith. And I said, one day I would like to wear a headscarf. And she was saying about, well, isn't that, very restrictive? Aren't you being restricted by that? And I was able to have that conversation as me and say, actually, that's one of my ambitions, one of my goals. And Jack, you and I have talked about this. And you look at the women, look at Arish. Does she look like she is restricted in any way? She is authentically and unapologetically her, and she's doing some great stuff. So I think it's a lot of that has been me embracing who I really am culturally and faith-wise.
And that is so important, so important. And I think it's about education, isn't it? And it's about people coming forward, sharing these stories, because that's the only way that you learn. And Jack, question to you then. What does being authentically you mean to you? How would you answer that question?
It's an interesting question, because it's actually something I talked about when, Tazmin, you and I did the episode a little while ago about male confidence, right? And talking about how I feel a bit weird about my place in not just the industry as a whole, in SEO and marketing, but in life in general. And that, hello, I'm a British, essentially middle-class, heterosexual, cisgendered white guy. So, like, I'm all of the privileges piled on top of each other. And it's so amazing to hear you guys talk. Sarah, your coming out story really was a powerful moment. And I could almost tell, having known you as a friend long enough, I could kind of tell that you weren't ready for it. And then you had that moment where you really kind of let go. And it was this beautiful moment where you kind of went, oh, I'm telling this story. I think you say it out loud, like, oh, I didn't think I'd be telling this story, but here I am. And the same for you, Tasman. Like you said, we've had conversations about this before. Like, if the two of us walk into a room, a lot of people will probably assume, like, oh, they're not friends, or they're not hanging out together, or whatever, just because of the way we look and our age difference, our size difference, and all this kind of stuff. But the fact that the three of us can come together, accept each other for who each other are, and that goes out to the audience as well, right? And I found it kind of tricky, because I was thinking, obviously, before I had to be dragged off to my sister-in-law's wedding by my wife. Lovely wedding, by the way. I'm looking at our photos just above my monitor here. Lovely photos. I'll show you guys after we finish the podcast, because I know you asked for some photos. But I was kind of coming to terms with, like, I don't have anything interesting to say. I'm just another white dude in SEO. Like, there's a million of us. Who cares? But interesting enough, I want to give a shout out to somebody in the audience as well, Levi Klukas, who mentioned neurodivergency, and that is something I has become a big part of my identity since almost exactly a year ago. Actually, it was the beginning of June 2023 when I first got diagnosed with ADHD, and I'd kind of had inklings of a lot of, I'm a bit weird, I'm a bit different, all the kind of stuff. Anybody who's even gone through that thought process probably has a similar kind of experience to me, where at the ripe old age of 32, I was like, I should probably do something about this, right? I should probably, actually work out and get a diagnosis. And some people don't want to go down that route. That's fine. But I felt like that was the right route for me. And I know this was something, again, you and I were talking about, Tazmin, the previous Brighton SEO, and how much that representation has now shifted in that I now feel like I can be authentically myself. I can now open up, and I've had people mention it both at the live podcasts we've done, from podcasting, both Search with Candour and Sequelize and stuff. The audiences from those two shows are very different, but people have said, oh, I really appreciated you saying about your ADHD diagnosis or about your mental health struggles or whatever it is. I felt heard, I felt seen by you talking about that stuff openly. And the fact that you guys were able to be vulnerable in your own ways about your own experiences, I think is a huge matter of representation for people in the audience. And the other side of it, as you said, Sarah, was like the education side of it. I will never come out as a gay man, let alone a gay woman, and I'm not religious. I'm a white guy. I've not struggled with race issues or faith issues or any bullying related to that sort of stuff. So hearing your guys' stories helps me understand the world better, understand my fellow humans better. Right? I think it's a part of the broader journey. So hopefully my kind of little contribution, and like I said, shout out to a couple of members of the ND and SEO community who were there in the audience and representing us neurodivergent folks in there, talking about that, and that being a struggle when it comes to the workplace, when it comes to conferences, when it comes to big social situations. Neurodivergent stuff can really kick in at those points, and having those voices heard and represented, I thought was really, really nice. And that would be definitely the kind of thing I would be talking about if I was at the live podcast that time around, about being authentically myself. The whole concept of masking that I know a lot of people on the autistic spectrum talk about, and a lot of us with ADHD talk about as well. You kind of find yourself restraining yourself a little bit and dialing yourself down to be a bit more socially acceptable. And exactly kind of the equivalent of that, as you were talking about there, Tazmin, talking about, I want to express my faith in a more open way. I want to build myself up to that. I want to, be more unapologetically open about my faith and honest about my faith to the people around me. It's in a similar kind of way, being open and honest about your mental health and your neurodivergency and stuff like that. I think it helps a lot of us. The reason Sarah Presh and I started that community, the neurodivergent and SEO community, is because we want to have those open conversations. If you get a bunch of us neurodivergent people together, we all start having similar conversations like, oh yeah, am I the only one who does this? There's the most common question on our Slack channel is, does anyone else find that blah, blah, blah happens? Insert problem here. And we all go, yes, we all do that. Yes, of course. Yeah, I've experienced 10 years ago, I've been doing that. 5 years ago, oh, that happened to me last week, all that kind of stuff. And having that ability to kind of share your story, whether that's with other members of the community or, as we're saying there, like educating people outside of that community to help spread the good word, essentially, help people understand and build tolerances and understanding of different things, I think is a hugely powerful message. I think that's why so many different people, so many different parts of the industry came to the live podcast and felt such of a benefit from it, right?
100%. And thank you for your input on there, and your vulnerability, because it takes people being willing to do that for that education to come about. And we don't know like who's going to end up listening to this episode, for example, but hopefully like what we have shared in this episode, it will resonate and touch someone out there. Yeah, because that's the whole about being seen and heard and relatable.
Yeah.
That is the aim of the game. Now we need to take a short break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to be talking more about being authentically us. We're going to chat about challenges. And there's a few questions as well that I want to ask you both. So join us back for part 2, everyone. Introducing Clear Narrative Media, a purpose-led media marketing agency that transforms how founders, creatives, and organizations share their stories online. Dedicated to assisting you with all your marketing, content, and strategy needs. Their services include photography, consultancy, and social media management. Clear Narrative Media is here to transport your visions to life. They are on a mission to help you to create awareness, build visibility, and enhance your business and professional growth overall. For more information, head over to their website at cnmedia.com or follow the link in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the SEO Mindset podcast. If you enjoy the podcast and our episodes, you can support me and Tazmin by giving us a donation on our Buy Me a Coffee page. The URL is the seomindset.co.uk/donate. You can donate as much or as little, and we'd be very appreciative. You can also follow or subscribe to the podcast by going to the seomindset.co.uk/listen. So by going there, you can subscribe or follow on your podcast playing platform of choice. And this is a great way to be notified whenever a new podcast episode is live and ready for you to listen to. Thank you for joining us back for part 2. Tazmin and Jack, are we both still here?
Still here, ready to rock.
Still here.
Excitedly here.
Jack's not been put off and not thinking, oh gosh, I've got to do this more.
What have I signed myself up for? Oh no. I've got to be vulnerable on a podcast. Oh no.
4 times a year.
I know, right?
Take you out of your comfort zone, Jack, because that is the only way that you grow. Sounded a bit cliche. Now, what I'd like to get from you two, and Tazmin, I'm going to direct the question to you first. So what would you say was your main takeaway from the live podcast?
For me, it was one, that you don't know what anyone's story is, and everyone's got a story. Everyone's got something that they are tussling with. But the great thing about the live podcast was that people felt comfortable enough to share, supported enough to be able to tell their story, and went home feeling, like Ash was saying, happier. So for me, that was my big takeaway from the live.
And what a beautiful takeaway that is. Jack, over to you.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback from that, like I said, I'm coming at it from an audience perspective, right? I was in the live chat. If you go and look at the YouTube video, you can check that. You can see me commenting in there. And it was really nice to hear. Obviously, I know you guys pretty well. We're friends. We're not just podcast colleagues. We are friends outside of this. And
Jack is lying. We don't really know each other at all.
He's paying us to be here. But no, I'd heard like snippets of your story. I'm aware of elements of your background and stuff. So it was really nice for me to learn more about Willow as well. Somebody who I've still never met, but I was so impressed with Willow and her open and honesty, talking about being a mother and her struggles with that and her journey through, again, talk about neurodivergence and stuff like that, dealing with struggles there when it comes to being a parent of a neurodivergent child. I know that's something you can relate to as well, Tazmin, something you talked about on the live podcast as well. And then the opening up of the audience. And I come back to that quote from Ash, and again, kind of want to piggyback what you said there, Tazmin, like not having to say anything but feeling heard felt like a really powerful statement. And I know people I've spoken to since who didn't contribute any questions, didn't feel the need to, say anything, didn't do the little rubber, the little foam box thing, the catch box thing and speak into the microphone or anything like that. but still felt like they were part of something. And, you know, people were almost speaking on their behalf. Like I said, when you get representation from different parts, you get, oh, Sarah's talking about a coming out story. I can relate to that because I'm a part of the LGBTQ plus community. I can relate to Jack's story because I'm neurodivergent, all that kind of stuff. I think that was a really kind of brilliant moment that people were messaging me afterwards being like, oh, mate, you really missed out. It was amazing. Sarah and Tazmin were brilliant. Willow was brilliant. You know, all this kind of stuff. And
really laying on the FOMO for you there then.
Pretty much. Yeah. Shout out to Steve from Majestic, by the way, because I laid on the FOMO and I was like, oh, I know he went to Cadbury World and he was bringing a bunch of chocolates and stuff. And I joked being like, oh, man, well, if you fancy sending some chocolates my way in Norwich, that would be great. And Steve, to his absolute credit, actually did. And I got a bag of cream eggs and a box of Curly Whirlies on my desk when I came back from my trip up north. So thank you, Steve, if you're listening.
Helped with your popularity.
Exactly.
And not that you need help with your popularity, Jack. Not at all.
Sometimes.
But yeah, and I think we just need to quickly say big shout out to all the sponsors of the night, because it couldn't have gone ahead without them. So like you say, Majestic was there, Stat was there, Sistrix was there. They were all sponsoring us. So thank you so much. Yeah, here's to many more. And my main takeaway was catch boxes are very notoriously dangerous. No, not at all.
Wear goggles when using a catch box. That's health and safety of a live podcast.
You could see the terrors from people's eyes as they're like, oh crikey, I've got to catch this. So I would echo what has already been said, but one of the things that sticks in my head was actually something that Willow said, and it was about, on her journey of being authentically herself, is coming to terms with you don't have to bring yourself to everything all the time in every situation. Yeah, because I did exactly the same thing. So when you think about being authentically you, you're like, right, it's got to be all of me. Everything's going to come
110%
out.
Sarah all the time.
Which no one wants. No one needs that. But no, it was really interesting what Willow said is about you don't have to do that. Yeah, that's not being authentically you. You get to decide. And Tazmin, it's all about your boundaries, isn't it? What do you want to show? Like, depending on what relationship, what situation, what setting you find yourself in, you can decide what you're comfortable with showing. Yeah. So, for example, there's a side of me that you two, Tazmin and Jack, get to see, but not everyone else that I come into contact. And that's not because I'm afraid to be myself or like I don't want to be authentic. It's just that is what I'm comfortable with. Yeah. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I think that's a... Sorry, go on, Tazmin.
I think there's a part of me that you two see that maybe some people in my friend circle don't. So I won't talk a lot about my podcasting there because it's a different world. This is a different world. So it's like this big you've got different facets and you get to choose which facets each group sees.
Yeah, I think my friends wish I would stop talking about podcasting because I'm sure it's very annoying for them. I'm the podcast guy to so many people. I think that's a really interesting one, and that ties back to what I was saying about masking earlier. I think what you're saying there, both of you actually, Sarah, what you're saying about not having to be 100%, 110%, even pushing yourself further all the time, and then tying into that with what you were saying, Tazmin, of having essentially different masks. That's where the term masking comes from in the neurodivergent community. Different masks for different situations. I'm a bad example of this. I am kind of just me all of the time. Pretty much me that you're seeing on a live podcast or being recorded here or hanging out with my wife or my friends or my family. I'm pretty much the same, give or take. But I think I do, especially when you go to big events and stuff like that, using Brighton SEO as a perfect example, I had used this term for years without kind of realizing it was a thing for people with ADHD and on the autistic spectrum and stuff, is that I feel like I have to switch it on, like I have to be like, oh, hey, hi, how are you? Haha, smiley, like extra energy and all that kind of stuff. And exactly as you were saying there, Sarah, like if you're like that all the time, that is a pretty quick way of burning yourself out and tiring yourself out and not giving yourself that space. I know that's something we talked about previously, having that space to, if you're an introvert like myself, and I'm thoroughly introverted, having the time to just chill out, read a book, play video games, watch TV, whatever it is, go and sit in the garden, play with your cats, whatever it is, having that ability to kind of reset your energy is hugely important. And always being on can be great from a professional standpoint. Like, I think the biggest probably shift for me is when I'm speaking to clients or doing presentations from a professional perspective. Professional Jack is slightly different to podcasting Jack, and then is slightly different to personal Jack. But it's usually kind of like the amount of swearing kind of dials up or down depending on the situation, which I'm sure annoys Tazmin at any given opportunity.
We know Tazmin has a swear word up her sleeve. Like,
the one.
That's reserved for that one moment, right, Tazmin? we are running. I can see those sleeves. They're quite. I've got
baggy. Short sleeves on. Swear words flying all over the place.
We are, unfortunately, time is against us both. Time is against us. But what I do want to squeeze in is just sort of talking about challenges. So Tazmin, going to you first. So obviously we did discuss this on the night, but let's talk about it more or get a different perspective. But when you're trying to be more authentically you, what is the biggest challenge that you sort of see?
First, you have to know what authentically you is. You have to know who you are. And that's a journey that not many people go on. And when you do go on it, it's not the easiest of journeys, because you will uncover things about yourself that you don't particularly like. So forget about you being authentic to everyone else. You have to learn how to be authentic to yourself. And then the next step, so you're getting to know yourself, you've uncovered some good stuff, some bad stuff. The next step is accepting who you are, because if you're not going to accept yourself as you, why would anybody else? And be happy that it is a work in progress. Yes, I might not be great at that thing, but I'm getting better at it all the time. And that's when you start living very much more comfortable in your own skin, and you're more in flow with yourself. And when you get to that point, it's so much easier to be authentic with everyone else, because you're happy as you. Whereas if you're not happy as you, and you say, you know what, I don't like this about me and this about me and this about me, but you know what, I am who I am, and you're going to have to just accept me the way I am. It's a tussle, whereas it's better if you can figure all of that out yourself. So that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times when we have conversations, Tazmin, on the podcast, self-awareness and getting to know yourself comes up a lot, because that's the biggest thing, isn't it? And if there is a part of you that you don't like, explore it. Why are you that way? Because it might surprise you as you do some self-discovery. For example, it might be a coping mechanism. Something may have happened to you, like, not to get all psychological.
You're turning into a therapist here, Sarah.
But everything is related back to childhood. No, I'm joking. But no, in all serious, well, yeah.
Depending on which psychologist you speak to, yeah.
But until you get to understand you and why you are the certain way that you are, because once you've got that understanding, you might be okay with it. So yeah, that's a great shout, Tazmin, and it's easier said than done, but worthwhile, isn't it? Right then, Jack, over to you. What is your biggest challenge?
It's something, like I said, I've been coming to terms with since my diagnosis last year. It's a conversation I've been having with my wife, basically, for a long, long time, where I do a lot of stuff that annoys my wife. Surprise, like classic married couple stuff, right? Like classic, typical long-term relationship stuff. And
What are you talking about? I never annoyed Tash. Never.
I'll just quickly message Tash and be like, how much is how truthful is Sarah being right now? Well, no, you guys are starting a business together, sharing a workspace and stuff.
You know what? I derailed you. Carry on.
No. But yeah, I think it's a conversation we were having about our different communication styles and stuff like that. As Tazmin was saying, getting to know yourself from the inside helps to understand how you can then use the communication tools and equipment and all this kind of stuff, not literally in terms of podcast equipment, but the tools and styles of communication. I'm understanding that I tend to need a lot of context for things. So if I'm, especially in the workplace, somebody tells me to do something, I want a really detailed brief about that thing. What is this thing? Why am I doing it? How long is it going to take? All this kind of stuff. And some of my colleagues, including my wife, are just like, I'm just going to do it as quickly as I can and get it done. And that stresses me out. I am a slow and steady, detailed kind of person. And being open and honest about that at work and having that conversation with my colleagues and, people who I report to for tasks and stuff like that, being like, by the way, if you're going to work with me, I would prefer it if you do it this way. I would really appreciate if you can, lay out the task in this way or whatever. And I know I've worked with clients before. Shout out to a former client of mine who was like, I hate spreadsheets. Can't deal with spreadsheets. They're just one big blur to me. Can't deal with numbers. Can't deal with text in spreadsheets. If you can find another way to format the information, I would massively appreciate that. And I, being the kind of person I was like, yeah, absolutely. I will find another way. And we ended up doing a lot of stuff through presentations, slides, and Google Docs rather than using it in spreadsheets. And she was so appreciative of it. It made such a big difference. And it was just a matter of asking. And I find that is kind of my biggest challenge, is just asking and being honest and being like, would you mind doing this thing? Would you, if at all possible, could you do it this way instead of this way? Because that helps me process the information differently, or this will help me achieve it quicker or better or whatever it is.
And also, you've got to remember that people are wired differently from you as well. So you can't expect just because you'd expect to be given a job in a certain way that you would do it, doesn't mean that someone else would do that. And the same as if you're asking someone to do something. So like being aware of what that person needs. And as you were talking about being open and honest with your people within your team. So we've both had Dana on our podcast, haven't we? So you recently had Dana on the Search with Candor. We had Dana as a recent guest. Wonderful human, wonderful person.
Love Dana Tomato. She's amazing.
Fabulous name as well. But yeah, she came onto the podcast is just to discuss having ADHD and running a business. And she said one of the things that she's had to do is exactly what you've said, like ask. So there's certain things that she's asked her employees or her other team members or the people within her business and her business partner. There's certain things that she needs, processes or the ways of working that make sure that you're getting the best of Dana. So that is that, isn't it?
Yeah, it amazes me because I had recorded with Dana shortly before the SEO Mindset episode came out. And Dana and I never once, I don't think, in our nearly hour conversation, said the word ADHD to each other, despite the fact we're obviously both diagnosed. We're both diagnosed as adults and have a lot in common with that perspective. But we were so focused on GA4 and analytics, and I was so interested in learning her perspective because she is like one of the people to follow, in my opinion, about GA4 and analytics and stuff. But yeah, I think that is such a powerful thing when it comes to my learning process, is like learning to ask for help, learning to ask for slightly different things. I know, shout out to another SEO, Miriam's SEO, they talk about how much they hate lists. If you give me another to-do list, I'm going to throw it in your face, is a quote from Miriam's talk from a previous Brighton SEO. I have lists of lists and I don't need any more lists. Never create a list. I am the opposite. I need lists to function. If it's not on a to-do list, it doesn't get done. So I need that kind of constant reminder. And I know some people who have like physical lists, literally like a little notepad or something on their desk in front of them at all times. So it is There you go, Sarah. Perfect example.
It's even got, I'm aware that this is audio format, but I am just showing Jack that on my physical notebook, I've got little check boxes next to my,
perfect.
and there's nothing more satisfying. I mean, this is a clear one because obviously I've done all mine, haven't I? Checked them off.
There you go.
But there's nothing more satisfying than ticking something off.
Absolutely.
But,
yeah. But some people find that structure restraining and restrictive, right? And understanding how, especially in the workplace, and I know this is, partly why we do this podcast, right, is talking about helping people work better and understand each other better in workplaces and things like that. I found being open and honest about my processing, my communication style, what to expect from me, what not to expect from me, how you can get the best out of me. Thankfully, and this is me not kissing bums or anything like that, shout out to Candor and the management team and their directors who are very supportive of this kind of thing and have been very open with us. The whole team, we went through a process to discuss this, and it was really nice to kind of have that open conversation. And I think more workplaces should be doing that, right? Should be open to these questions and conversations. And for me, like, asking for help is one of the hardest things I can do. I am terrible at that. I will soldier on and put myself through absolute hell before I even slightly bother. I'm like, I am so sorry, Sarah. Would you be able to spare just 30 seconds to help me with this thing that I've been toiling on for like a week straight and I'm pulling all my hair out and stuff? It's like, yeah, if you'd have just asked like 3 days ago, we could have done this in 10 minutes. Like, oh God, yeah, of course. And yeah, that asking for help and being open and honest about what you need from friends, colleagues. And like I said, the same conversation with my wife. We're now having conversations. She's now going down the ADHD diagnosis track and thinking about that as well. Because there's so much of what I've learned about myself and being authentically myself that she's like, I do that a lot as well, don't I? It's like, yes, you do. Yeah. You nod, and then she'll do something else, and I'll just lean over and go, yes, that sounds like one of the diagnosis criteria for ADHD, doesn't it? She's like, yes, it does. Yeah. My wife's a nurse, so she's very like medically minded as well. So she's kind of aware of all of that stuff. So yeah, that journey of being more authentically myself and learning to ask questions to get the best out of me and get the best out of my work, my relationships, my podcast partnerships, or whatever it is, I think has been a big learning journey for me over the last year or so.
Thank you very much for sharing. And yeah, we can all be better. I think we can all take away something from that, being better, asking for what we need and being open and transparent. Right, Jack, that is it. Unfortunately, Jack and Tazmin, we are at the end. We are at the end of this week's episode, our first special episode with Jack. Yeah.
They just call them the special episodes now. And I like that title. We give that. Yeah.
I mean, this is where maybe we need to start live streaming these because people just missed your happy dance then.
They did. Yeah. And you guys do social clips and stuff, right? Well, the social clips for this episode will just be your to-do list and my happy dance just repeated back and forth. Like, yeah.
We'll get a meme going. Right. So, yes. Thank you very much for listening. Now, the live podcasts are going to be a regular feature of Brighton SEO.
We're now officially a Brighton SEO Fringe event. Yay! Woo! Thank you, Brighton SEO. Shout out to Joe, Kelvin, Dre and the team. It was a big deal for us.
So whenever you are going to Brighton SEO, there will be a live podcast where you can come and join me and Tazmin from the SEO Mindset, Jack from Search with Candor, and we'll pick a topic that is relevant to you attending the conference the next day, but also about mental health, personal growth, career development. That is what those live podcasts are about. If you would like to receive notifications of when we are doing these, so if you want to be part of our mailing list so that you get notified about all of these things going on, there'll be a link in the show notes, and all you need to do is submit your email address and then you'll never miss that. Jack, were you about to say something?
So the next Brighton SEO here in the UK is the 3rd and 4th of October. So we are planning for the Wednesday, the 2nd of October is the scheduled date for the next live podcast. We're not going to San Diego yet, but don't count your chickens. Maybe we'll make our way to the US or something like that. And ideally, we want to expand this and partner with more conferences. And as much as we love Brighton, like I said, huge shout out to the team, the Rough Agenda team behind the event and stuff. We're open to doing it around other conferences and other events as well. So if you're out there in listener land, folks who have organised events and stuff, and you want to have a live podcast as part of your conference and event, or as a pre-show kind of fringe event like we're doing with Brighton SEO, let us know, get in touch.
We've got the format nailed.
Exactly, yeah. We're experienced now. We know what we're doing.
We're experienced. But yeah, that's a great shout. So yeah, get in touch. We're everywhere, aren't we, on the socials? So you can easily find us. Wonderful. Right. We need to wrap up then, Jack and Tazmin, and say goodbye and until next time. Looking to create awareness, build visibility, and enhance growth for your business, organisation, or yourself? Introducing Clear Narrative Media, a purpose-led media and marketing agency that transforms how founders, creatives, and organisations share their stories online. Dedicated to assisting you with all your marketing, content, and strategy needs. You can find them on all social media platforms and online at cnmediaa.com or follow the link in the show notes.